This episode of Ticket Volume is brought to you by us, Invigate. Get service operations under control in no time. Get 1 free month of our software solution by going to try.invigate.com. Ticket Volume is thrilled to present to you an ITIL V3 expert, an XLA master, and a certified USM coach. He began his career managing sales for a custom app dev team at Unisys, doing sales and quality improvement at AT&T. He moved into service management and business development for a few companies before starting MyServiceMonitor and doing consulting and advising for companies like Third Sky, VMware, DealLogic, and EG Innovations. He now serves as a major contributor and fan to the expansion of USM, or the Unified Service Management Framework, in the United States. Welcome to Ticket Volume, news and information for improving IT experiences. I'm your host, Matt Barron, and each week I chat with different leaders to share insights on service management, technology, business, and so much more. I hope you're having a great day, and I also hope that you'll leave us a comment or connect with us or share our podcast with someone. Get involved, get us improving. Now, let's begin. Welcome, John Worthington, to Ticket Volume.
Well, thanks for having me, Matt. Glad to be here. Although I should comment that in your intro you called it a framework. It's very important. USM is a method, not a framework. We'll beat that to death in the foundation class.
I love it. Thanks for correcting me. So talk about that just a little bit, because so many times people, they go looking for alternatives to I won't even say it this early in the episode. They go looking for additional alternatives to their favorite frameworks, and they happen upon USM. What is the difference between a framework and a methodology?
Well, a framework is a structured set of practices. So there are many frameworks. There's ITIL and IT for IT and Scrum and on and on and on. And there's nothing wrong with that. People should go look for that. You need that. A method is learnable, is repeatable, and is a specific series of steps to accomplish a certain goal or objective. And so the Unified Service Management method is a way of establishing a service management system for any service provider. That's what it's all about. And we go to great lengths to distinguish between the methods and frameworks, because one of the things that's unique about the USM method is it allows you to apply any framework or standard or multiple frameworks and standards and still have some degree of standardization across the enterprise. That's the real benefit.
Okay. So, like, to draw a comparison to something else, is it similar to like design thinking or like the OODA loop? Observe, decide, check, act. No, do, check, act. Plan, do, check, act.
It borrows heavily from what came before. Just like any kind of framework and improvement is built on history, right? Decades of history, and USM is no exception. So, you will see some similarities, and in some cases, things that you remember from ITIL, Plan, Do, Check, Act. This is a good example. And so the short answer is yes. But what really makes the Unified Service Management, I think, unique is three things. It's got a logically repeatable definition of service. That applies to any service, not just IT services. And it's got a non-redundant process model of 5 processes and 8 standard workflows. And those basic building blocks apply to any service provider in any line of business, in any service team within the enterprise. So that's really what makes it, and that's what caught my attention when I heard 5 processes and 8. After, beating my head against the wall with 34 practice areas, I was more than a little curious.
Yeah. I think you've kind of nailed it on the head. What draws me to USM specifically is that simplicity. We're so used to complexity, and just being beaten over the head with, these are the terms you need to know, and this is why you need to know them, and trying to fit those into every organization. that I'm often looking for refreshing takes and open-minded ideas on how we can approach these sort of things. So let's talk a little bit about how you found it, because obviously you're an ITIL V3 expert. How did you actually come across this? What brought you to it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I had been I had drank the ITIL Kool-Aid. I was doing instruction and deployments. I was trying to help customers, and uh, I had a break. I went to work for EG Innovations, and was in the monitoring AI ops kind of space. And so I really was not directly involved in ITIL anymore, and had a life-changing event. My brother passed away, and I decided I can't keep doing this tool thing anymore. I need to. It just wasn't healthy for me. So I remembered that I really enjoyed teaching, and I enjoyed the service management space. And so I started poking around. I remembered running into Jan van Baan years ago, and I saw and I heard the 5 processes and 8 workflows. And I said, okay, I need to find out more about this. And one thing led to another, and now I've drank in the USM Kool-Aid. And so I believe strongly that the USM method is something that, particularly as we move to enterprise service management, is something that's really needed. A dose of simplification is really, really needed right now. So
Yes,
that's
yes.
that's how I got here.
Yeah, we talk about simplification like it's simple, but simple isn't easy.
No, 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 no. That's true. Simple is not easy, but it's worthwhile. And particularly today, I think if we don't simplify, our complexities are going to start getting hard coded into the enterprise, and that is not a good thing. That I think is going to bite people in the butt if they're not careful.
Yes, I see it all the time already, where IT and HR need to share a specific space, whether it's a shared service center or a single point of contact service desk or a self-service portal. And like right away, one of the first things that we need to address is that IT calls them incidents and HR calls them cases. But really, in both situations, there's a customer with a need, either a need that we've created, like something has broken in one of our services, or we just don't have a predictable way to respond to what they need. And that's sort of one of those things that is one of the details around building these things.
Well, what's
And
interesting about that, Matt, is both of those scenarios, both the IT and finance or the other business unit, are operating at a practice level. And
Mhm.
so they adapt the practice to their specific needs. They may use different practice frameworks because they have different needs. There's nothing wrong with that, but they have to tree up to something common. There has to be a layer that says, look, this is how the enterprise is going to work. That's what USM provides.
That's fantastic. Okay, so you describe it as a method for establishing a unified service management system.
Yep.
So break that down just a little bit. Does it mean, is it all about tool? Does it ignore a process completely? Where does it begin? Like how do you establish that
Yeah.
service management
So,
system?
first of all, it does not start with tool.
Okay.
And traditional best practice, you always need to establish the process first, right? Because you need to
Truth.
identify, well, what is it we're going to do, and then you go to who and how we're going to do it. And so tools should not come first. Unfortunately, often they do, which is a whole nother discussion. But the USM method establishes a non-redundant process model of 5 processes and 8 standard workflows that apply to any service team or any service provider inside or outside the enterprise. And what this allows us to do is create a level of standardization across all of the different providers within the enterprise. And then below that, each of the providers can use whatever framework they want. So if you want to use ITIL or IFM or whatever, it doesn't matter. they're all gonna tree up into a generic management system, which the enterprise can use to properly govern improvement initiatives and so forth.
Mm.
And that's what really appealed to me. That's what caught my attention. And the more I learned about it, the more I talked to customers in Europe that were using it, the more convinced I became that this is something people need to open their eyes and find out more about.
Yes, I agree. And here you are,
Yeah.
helping me learn about it. It's interesting that you mentioned governance. I had David Billu on, who's the ITIL master as well, and he talks about it now that there's this value chain concept within ITIL that you kind of have this process layer, and then above that you need this like value layer where you're understanding what people are getting out of the processes. And I've had several people mention that governance is another layer that can be above there where you really need the business needs governance, not necessarily IT, but what are our goals, missions, values, and then govern our activities to achieve those things.
Yep.
Is that kind of how you think about it, like a layer above?
Well, no, the USM method as a management system would feed the governance method. So if you're familiar with the COBIT model, for example, you'd have governance at the top of the triangle and management at the base of the triangle. USM is at the base of the triangle. So what we're going to
God,
do is establish a standard generic management system that simplifies the interface to the governance team. And
got it.
that's where USM operates. And it does so by allowing the people that are applying practices in each different part of the enterprise to have a common structure to structure all of their daily routines around. And that's really what USM is all about.
Got it. So everyone can use them. And then when providers are speaking and collaborating, they all can use that term and they all know what each other are talking about.
Yeah, it simplifies the translation. You don't have to, you've got 34 practice areas over here and COBIT, 28 COBIT over here. What happens is at a process level, things become unstable and they're not coherent. And so
Mm.
that's a problem, particularly when you talk about enterprise service management. And that affects governance because it just becomes noise, right? So
Mm.
USM addresses that. In fact, what I found interesting is ISO. One of the things you find if you look at the ISO standards, they say one of the first things you need to do is establish a management system, and they tell you what the management system requirements are, but they don't really tell you. They don't give you a method for how to do that. USM
Mhm.
does that. That's what the USM method does. It's a method for establishing a generic service management system, which ISO has told us for a long time that's the first thing you should do, and that's not where most people start. Most people start with the frameworks. So
Okay. Okay. So, you're going into organizations. People are coming to you, and they're, maybe poking around. What is this thing? What can I do with it? And they'll book maybe a workshop with you to learn a little bit more, or
mhm.
they go to a training to learn a bit more. Is that kind of how people get started with it?
Yeah. Usually, they'll go to. I have open workshops, 2-hour workshops every month. They'll go to a workshop and they'll be curious, and then usually a couple of months will go by and they'll be poking around. Maybe they'll read the book, spend $50. They'll go buy the book and read the book, and then they'll be a little bit more interested, and they'll come back and we may do another workshop. But eventually, they'll get into a 2-day foundation class, and say, we want to try it out. We want to put it in this department, or we want to put it in this area, or put it in doesn't really matter. You can start anywhere in the enterprise, and it goes from there. Uh, it doesn't have to be a big bang. It can be incrementally, which is another reason I like it. The other thing that's important is for me at my stage of life, I'm just doing coaching. I not This is not something I'm going to do. This is something that you're going to do, and so I'm just going to, give you help along the way. That's it. But it's pretty straightforward once you've been through the foundation class, I think the light usually goes on.
And so the foundation class will help you like apply it. It's similar to
Yeah, it's
any other.
it's an APMG certified course. It's 2 days. You spend 2 days in class, and then the half a day to do exam prep or whatever. But it's pretty straightforward, like an ITIL foundation class. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Once you've done that, you're ready to, experiment, find a pilot in the enterprise, and test it out.
Yeah, exactly. Find a project, find somewhere where you need some sort of guidance or improvement to apply it to. Would you say would you say that this so part of what I love about it is that you aren't being very specific. You're not you're not saying specifically this is what it is. And you keep talking about a generic service management system. It'll help people manage in a more volatile, changing world, right? Like so that it, ChatGPT comes along, blows our socks off. We need to, change our operating model. The business is changing how it delivers products and services. Is it meant to be open-ended so that it can adapt to those situations?
Well, you want a foundation. Jan van Bon, the chief architect, would say that you want to look at USM and the process model as a foundation of your building, and then the frameworks would be the floors of the building. If you don't have a stable foundation and you're constantly changing frameworks and operating models, that's a problem, right? So what USM provides by establishing this generic management system is it's a stable foundation for the enterprise. So, and again, remember, it's linking to governance. So if you want to govern the enterprise as you move to enterprise service management, you need some stability amongst all of the changes that are happening. And that's what USM does, I think, very well. And the secret to that, and what he's done, it took him almost almost a decade, 8 years, to finally flush out this non-redundant process model and workflows. So he's done a remarkable job, in my opinion.
So if I understand correctly, if you've got USM in place, your operations team, your service desk, event management network team, they can be using ITIL, but then your app dev team can be using Agile, and your HR team can be using SHRM, and the foundation then supports them using all those things, not only using them, but then collaborating between them all.
Yep.
Okay, that's a great visual. I like that.
Another visual that I had that Jan actually doesn't like is I was familiar with the APQC process classification framework. And what that does is it analyzes streams of related activity, or what they would call processes. And so you have a category, which would be service management, process group, which would be your workflows, process, which would be in the middle, and then you have activities and tasks or procedures and work instructions. The process level, that middle level, needs to be stable because changes are happening at the workflow level and they're changing at the practice level, at the procedure and work instruction all the time. So if you don't have stability at that middle level, or if you want to call it a foundation, that's fine too. That stability is needed, especially in times of rapid change. And that's what USM does.
Yes, I can see how this would also enable better employee experiences, more autonomy on the front line, so to speak, the people who are actually doing the work, right? If you've got more open work instructions, more open standard operating procedures that allow people to take the action needed, then you still have this control layer that's standard and consistent while allowing that autonomy at the lower levels.
It does, and in fact, what I like about it, it's really based on systems thinking. So if you look at the enterprise and say, the main components of my enterprise are people, process, and tools, I can't just improve people or just improve tools or just
Nope.
improve process because they all work
Are
together.
related.
And so
Yeah.
what USM defines is the routines are basically the practices, the process, procedures, and work instructions are what make the enterprise go. That's what delivers services and value and satisfaction and good experiences to customers. So if I'm having trouble or having bad experiences, I need to look at these practices or these routines, and I must look at them holistically from a system perspective because they all interact. The people, process, and tools work as a system, and you cannot look at them independently. And so that's something that USM does very well.
That's great. I mean, that's one of my primary complaints about a lot of these improvement initiatives. You go in and you define the processes and you define the procedures and the work instructions, and then it's almost as if you're assuming that they're never going to change.
Yeah, and they don't run in isolation. They're
Right.
built on all the other things. They all work as a system. And so if you don't, if you're not, if you don't have a structure that allows uh, everyone to uh, see the impact of changes of a routine on the rest of the system, then you've got a problem. And in fact, uh, since USM is generic, you apply it to all parts of the enterprise, it becomes a unified link in a service supply chain because
Mm.
everyone in the enterprise, inside and outside the enterprise, is a service provider. And so the USM is providing a standardized link that everyone is consistent with. That is that is another aspect of systems thinking, right? Is because it's not just our service. Our service depends on other services. How do they all work together? And what is this seemingly innocent change that I'm going to make? How's that going to ripple across the rest of the system? USM provides that standardized link, which is, again, very important today.
Man, I could see that being super useful. So I assume that this improves, like value stream mapping. Then, for example.
Well, I don't know that it improves it. Uh, it, it the 8 workflows are essentially value streams. So you have 8 standard
Mm.
value streams that apply to everyone. But when we do value stream mapping, we're usually doing it uh, to include uh, not only what we do, but who does it and how they do it. It includes people and tools in the analysis, which is it should, and so that's a good thing. So when you do value stream mapping, you'll have 8 standard value stream maps because USM provides that stability, but at a procedure and a work instruction at the who and the how level, who's doing the work and how they're doing, what tools they're using, the value stream analysis still becomes very important. The other comment I want to make about value stream mapping, because I knew you were going to ask me about value stream mapping, is there's 2 kinds of value streams. There's value streams that are associated with service management, and there are other value streams that are associated with services. They're different value streams. And so the
Mm-hmm.
customer journey is about using design thinking, whatever, about the service, but I still need to manage that service. So they're different value streams, and we need to be careful at mixing the two, I think.
That's awesome. Kaboom! That's the big one right there, right? That there's totally different. There's difference between delivering service and then managing the delivery of that service. Man, that's a good one, John. So what do people usually like? What is the big hang up? Like what sort of roadblocks do people have towards learning this? Is there a common complaint or a common issue that you run across as a trainer?
No, it's not a complaint or an issue. It's you've got decades, 30 years of practice-based thinking, and you've got uh, BPM and process-based thinking that people have been just immersed to think in a certain way. And in order to really get your arms around USM, you need to let go of some of that. At least I'm not saying forget it, because it's not that it doesn't have value anymore, but you need to open up your mind and think differently. And that's kind of an advantage I had, since I had a gap in my at my idle. I had been off the idle Kool-Aid for a couple of years, and when I came back in, I was particularly open to some new thinking. So it was a little easier for me. I don't know. I think it would have been harder if I was still on the idle Kool-Aid. And so you need to get off the idle Kool-Aid, even for a week or so, to give it a chance, because it is going to force you to think a little differently than you're used to.
Yeah, the old Apple tagline, think different.
Yep, that's right.
Oh man, I love that. I had someone come up to me at a meeting I was presenting at recently, and they asked, "Where do I get processes?" And it really made me check my values at the door, man, because I of course was like, well, you could Google it and find some processes, but then I was like, and then I thought, well, but those processes aren't going to fit your organization. And so it was really hard for me to bite my tongue. I just wanted to give them the easy answer. And it just doesn't feel like that easy answer is the same as it used to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, when you say the word process, you've said a mouthful, right? Process could mean just about anything, and it often does. And so, process is as much a discipline as it is a thing.
Mhm.
And so, when you get into process analysis, you can really uh, uh, get into excruciating detail, and that's not a bad thing. I mean,
No.
sometimes you need a lot of detail, but there's a flip side to that coin, and you can get lost in the weeds and forget about, at a base level, the process establishes what you're doing, right? And when we start adding swim lanes and links to tools, um, it can be a useful analysis, but it can get us off of what we're trying to do. We start focusing on who's doing it and how they're doing it. And USM is really good and has 10 design criteria for a process that can be difficult for process geeks to get their heads around, because we distinguish a process only determines what is done, not who's doing it and how it's doing it. There are no conditions. That's another one I had a problem with. But once you accept that and you realize why the lead architect chose to do it that way, you can see, now I know why. And it doesn't prevent you from doing process analysis. You can still do process analysis and flowcharts if you want to. But to understand USM, you got to let go of that, at least for a little bit.
Yeah. It provides you some constraints so that you can focus and actually get to a product, an actual outcome. And then later you can focus on those
Well,
details.
and that's how we got to a non-redundant process model, a five
Hmm.
process. You would have gotten that in a practice, because you're encumbered by who and what, who and how, I should say. Once you've got who and how, now you're constrained, because that's a localization issue. And there's, every part of the enterprise is going to have different who's and hows, and so that's a problem. So as soon as we start mixing that, we find it almost impossible to get a generic process model. And so that's one of the reasons I think Jan did that. So anyway.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Okay, John, where can people connect with you and learn more?
Well, the best thing, you could buy the book off the USM portal. It's usm-portal.com. And that's available either on Amazon, or he offers a online copy of the book, which is constantly updated. So it's called the repository. That's what I tend to use. I got a hard copy too, but you can go to my website. I offer 2-hour workshops every month. And they're limited to 6 to 8 people, so we can have some discussion. It's not a webinar. It's intended to have Q&A, and you can challenge me or whatever. And There's no charge for that. And then beyond that, there are workshops that I offer. There are free and paid workshops that I offer. There's an APMG accredited foundation class, and on and on. So there's plenty of other tools, and there is a lot of content and tools at the Service Foundation, which is a nonprofit foundation that owns the content. So this is not a for-profit enterprise. This is a nonprofit that is supporting the USM Foundation, which is another very important point. This is not a this is not a money-making endeavor. This is intended to be a not-for-profit foundation.
Yeah, sounds very altruistic. So thank you, John. Thanks for being on Ticket Volume.
Well, thanks for having me, and have a good day.
And thanks for listening to Ticket Volume. You can change or improve this podcast by DMing me or leaving a comment. Speaking of Ticket Volume, did you know that this podcast is brought to you by Invigate, the all-in-one IT service and asset management system that helps organizations with world-class IT support teams? If you're looking for a solution to build your help desk without the headaches of year-long implementations, you're going to love Invigate. In fact, IT teams from Toyota, NASA, and McDonald's use Invigate to manage requests, automate workflows, and centralize inventory data so that they can focus on delivering better service. Because good service is good business.